I do not know how long I have been on this train. I only know that I have fallen asleep and woken up again several times since I first embarked. No matter, though. I know that my stop is the last one on the line, and so I need not worry too hard about how long it has been or how long it will yet be. And so I simply look out the window and ponder my surroundings. The rolling countryside passes me by, cloaked in trees, twisted to suit the needs of human beings. Windows full of light, punctured into the surfaces. Surfaces which are twisted and distorted, roped and melded into door frames and bridges and towers. Fruit is grafted into the higher places, hanging down above the tracks in places. Below me, bubbles of vegetation thrive. The tracks of this train. They light up as the train passes over them. When I was young, I remember my parents told me that this was the light that powered the train. And as I grew older, I realized this would be a most inefficient method. An engineer I once met on a long cross-country journey like this one had informed me it was a system similar to magnetic levitation, although it did not employ any metallic components. I was curious how this worked, but I was no engineer, and I did not understand his explanation, though I nodded and smiled as though I did. The sun was close to setting, and the view was becoming an array of lights misarranged upon the horizon. I could no longer see the silhouettes of the buildings or the shape they took, and so only the lights remained, like eyes or like stars, dotting the darkness in unusual patterns. And so I nested my headphones above my ears and began to listen to a tale that I had been wanting to hear for quite some time now, but had never found quite the right opportunity to indulge myself in. Welcome to the Paranormal Podcast, sponsored by Ghost Begone Goo, the best ghost solution for all of your ghost hunting needs. Without further ado, we present to you a very special story from the northern reaches of High Siberia, where two paranormal investigators have gone to search for a very mysterious tower exposed at the bottom of a drained lake. My partner and I traveled to a small lake in the center of a lonesome valley somewhere in the region of High Siberia, far to the north. The melting permafrost had recently exposed a path for the water of the lake to flow out, and it had drained over the period of about 2 months. Formerly, a fishing village had occupied this land, or so we had been told by the mining company contracting our work. The fishing village had been established here several centuries prior, but had since been abandoned for the greater part of a century. It was clear upon our arrival the village had been mostly uninhabited a good few decades before everyone made their final exodus. Enormous profusions of cancerous fungus coated the lower levels, where once the villages had been grown. All of the buildings had gone wild and to seed. In them had been windows and lights and storefronts and doorbells, street lamps and traffic lights, and all of the various trappings of daily life. Once the village had been abandoned, however, all of these things were carried upward by the wild growth of the trees. Some wilted and withered away, while some made their stay and carried on longer, twisting ever higher into the treetops, and curling and twisting in that insane, maddening way that only northern pines can. And yet, over the madness created by the departure of civilization and the resummation of wild growth, there was a secondary madness superimposed, a madness of zigzags, of unnatural geometry, and of strange lateral growths. Furthermore, above the whole place hung a miasma of strange, nearly greenish mist, and lightning struck more than once as we climbed our way up the mountain passes to the small, hidden valley that contained the lake. Lightning, which through the mist appeared a strange greenish tint, an unnatural color, in an unnatural place. The mining company had only told us one thing. A strange wizard and an advisor to the Tsar had once made his previously thought to be unfertile wife bear new life, and this troubled the king. He suspected the worst of his advisor. For his transgressions, he was at once shot, poisoned, and beheaded, but none of these things seemed to deter him, as he repeatedly returned the following day after each execution, walking in the front door as if nothing had befallen him, and as though no harm had come to him. Every conceivable poison, every conceivable curse, and every conceivable method of annihilation, destruction, and dismemberment of the body was employed, and yet, day after troublesome day, the Tsar's advisor returned from the grave, walking in the front door with a light step and a whistle, as if nothing had gone wrong. And so the king saw fit only one course of action. He saw fit to imprison his advisor in a tall tower, lock the door, and cast the entire construction into the depths of a deep lake, 750 miles to the north and 750 miles to the east, and yet another 750 miles to the east for a good measure. The mystic, thus imprisoned, was forgotten for a solid 750 years before the melting permafrost began to expose the bottom of the lake. This was all the information we were given. We did not know what the mining company was searching for beneath that lake, and we did not ask, for we were not in the business of geology, but rather we were involved in the business of elucidating the nature of paranormal phenomena. Geologists and mining people are not superstitious by nature, and so we inferred from this that something more must have gone on than the simple uncovering of the tower. When at first we spied the lake through a cleft carved in an ancient tree by a lightning stroke, we could see that the tower was there, plain as day, the door thoroughly unopened. To think that the miners had not even ventured to breach the door was a thought that perturbed the both of us. For the legend surrounding this place must be very grim indeed to deter such rational folk. We began our descent at mid-afternoon, following a short break for lunch. Walking down the sides of the old lake, we found clinging mud stuck heavily to our boots, black and odorous. However, squelching the muck, it was apparently solid enough to support our weight at this point. It was now high summer, and this was likely the driest the lake bed would be before the mud froze solid in winter. We approached the door with caution, listening carefully, and employing yet further methods to uncover what spiritual energy may inhabit the place. However, these are trade secrets. You'll understand. When we reached the door, we heard nothing. At first, we elected to wait there in the hopes that we may hear whatever may be inside, or determine if any unnatural phenomena occurred in the vicinity of the tower. Nothing stirred for 1 full hour. We made our approach to the door, and as we moved to turn the latch and investigate the lock, we heard a distinctive sound. The sound of 3 strong knocks from the other side of the door, as though someone wished entry into the room we inhabited. But the room we inhabited was merely the world outside, a world which had remained separate from the interior of the tower for nigh on 750 years. And so, we knocked back 3 sharp raps in the hopes of a reply to establish a means of communication with whatever might lie inside. We received no reply. The latch and the lock and the bolting mechanism were all so hideously covered in rust and decayed with time and lake-bed grime that entry would be impossible through the normal means. The door, we knew, was horrifically thick, and so we elected to enter by the means of gunpowder. I withdrew 2 shells from my coat pocket. They were usually kept in reserve for the break-action shotgun, which I kept nearby at all times in these sorts of investigations. Though not the most useful in paranormal situations, one never knows how likely it is that one possessed by a certain madness might inhabit such a strange place as well. Animals were also known to be driven mad by strange phenomena. And in this respect, my shotgun had proven useful in many prior investigations. The shotgun shells were quickly relieved of their powder, which was poured generously into the lock hole. A quick lighting of a match, and a moment with hands clasped over both of our ears. The lock blew open. The door appeared to swing inwards, based on the configuration of the hinges, and so I gathered the enormous strength of my muscles and bones and heaved the entire lot against the door. It barely flinched. However, a low echo, a rattling, resounded through the tower at my impact against the door. One which was disproportionate to the force which I had used. I stepped back. My partner stepped back. We both huddled at either side of the door, waiting and breathing as lightly as the situation would allow. After a short pause, which may have been 5 or 10 minutes, I resumed my assault upon the door, throwing my entire weight against it once more. A shower of dust fell upon my head from the door jamb, and another rattling, another echo, another cacophonous moan echoed through the building. We stepped back once more, both to either side of the door, and this time the door swung open, slowly and gently open. The door swung inwards, revealing the enormous interior of the tower. My partner and I gathered our wills and lit our torches, and took our first step beyond the threshold of the accursed place. Within, we found more than we had expected. There was a desk and bookshelves, and the remnants of a table, though all were horribly decayed, beyond the point of recognizability in some cases. we merely inferred what we saw, for all was covered in a thick layer of deep lake grime and ravaged by hundreds of years of time. Seeing nothing on the first floor, we noted the presence of a spiral staircase which ascended to the upper levels. From the outside, we could tell that there were 3 rooms adjacent to the main tower. All of these would need to be investigated and thoroughly cleared of supernatural energy. And from that point, we could declare the entire region safe. But this may take longer than a single day, we could tell. But we had prepared for this eventuality with a good supply of baked beans. And so we began our ascent, step by agonizing step. The ascent of 20 meters or more led us to the first door. This hung ajar, almost all the way open. We stepped inside lightly, fearing the floor may be too decayed and might give way beneath our weight. But it held firm. Clearly, whoever had constructed this tower had intended it to last 1,000 years or more. Had intended it to last forever, perhaps. In this room, again, we saw more than we expected. Whoever had placed their advisor in the tower had intended to leave them with a great number of worldly riches, so that they might find their internment in this tower not entirely unpleasant. There was gold and silver and precious jewels. We touched none of this, for we knew how dangerous gold lust could be in such a situation, and with such dangerous spirits still at large. A ghost is one thing, an apparition quite another, and the apparition of one who practices dark magic is something of an entirely different kind. One does not tread lightly in their domain. From the treasury room we climbed once more to a second room, this one little more than an alcove, with no door. There were 2 chairs and a small table, and what appeared to have once been a ceramic mug. There was a window with solid iron bars, and windows that could have befitted a submarine. Perhaps the tower had been watertight when it had been lowered into the lake. Perhaps whoever had stayed within had lived a great deal of time before the air was entirely exhausted. And again we climbed, this time more than 30 meters, to the very, very top. The topmost room was configured of a floor which extended roughly 3 meters on all sides around the stairwell which we had ascended. Windows, these similarly barred and equipped with submarine-like pressure resistance, ringed the room. It was open and appeared to be empty, but all around us could be heard whispers, deadly whispers. The language was not discernible. Perhaps it would be called Russian. However, the separation of time, of such an immeasurably long time, had rendered the Russian a dialect unknown to either of us, though we had both practiced extensively before coming so far abroad. And then, from the depths of the tower, we heard a most unholy sound, an unutterable cacophony of ghostly intention, the rapturous sound of Boney M. playing Rasputin. My podcast was interrupted by the bell, and the announcement saying to gather our belongings and disembark. I donned my jacket, picked up my backpack and my other bags, and said farewell to the seat which had been my home for the past however long. And so I disembarked the train and walked the path in the rain. Very light rain, just a drizzle now. The lanterns grafted into the trees lit up before me and faded behind me as I walked. My bags were heavy, but I was equal to the challenge, and I knew that wherever I was going, I was ready.